Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Morant, since President Biden's been president, how many non-American citizens have come into our country illegally or on the basis of a claim of asylum?
Thank you, Senator. HSI, as an investigative agency, is...
Do you know the number?
No, Senator.
You're a senior member of Homeland Security, are you not?
That's correct.
Does anybody know the number? None of you know the number. Try 8 million. Now, of that 8 million, how many were children, Mr. Morant?
I don't have that number, Senator.
You don't know. Does anybody know? None of you know. Isn't that special? Let's assume half. Okay, 8 million is 4 Nebraskas, right? 4 new states. Let's assume, I don't think it's as high, half of them are children. How many of those 8 million people are still here? Do any of you know? Okay. How many of those 8 million are claiming asylum? You don't know? How many of them claim asylum and don't show up for their hearing? Nobody knows? How many of them claim asylum, don't show up for the hearing, and President Biden has deported them? You don't know? How many of them have claimed asylum, shown up for their asylum hearing, and been denied asylum and been deported? You don't know. How many of them were from Mexico? You don't know. How about 30%? That means 70% were not, right? Surely you know the answer to that. 30% minus 100% is 70%. Am I right? Okay. 30% came from Mexico. Why don't you implement a safe third country policy that says under our asylum rules, you have to seek asylum in the first safe country. So if you come, say, from Venezuela or Nicaragua or another Central American country, you have to seek asylum in the first safe country. Why don't you do that? And then that would eliminate 70% of the 8 million. That's 5.6 million. Why don't you do that, Mr. Morant?
Is that a question, sir?
Yes.
That's
All I've been asking are questions.
That's beyond the purview of HSI.
Oh, okay. How about you, Mr. Salazar? You're a former advisor to the Vice President. How come we don't do a safe third country agreement?
Sir, we're working with our partners in the region. 21 countries signed on to the Los Angeles Declaration.
Have you done a safe third country agreement? You've had, what have you been at it, 2 years?
What we are doing is working with them to expand legal pathways.
Why doesn't President Biden get up in the morning tomorrow and say, we're changing the asylum process and we're doing what most other countries do, safe third country policy. You have to seek asylum. We support asylum. We have to seek asylum in the first safe country. That would eliminate 5.6 million people, boom, done, coming into our country illegally, wouldn't it?
Sir, I just want to point out Washington.
Wouldn't it?
It would, sir, but there are activities underway.
Let me ask you this, because I'm going to run out of time. President Biden and all of you believe in open borders, don't you? Don't you? I mean, I ask really basic questions. I don't mean any disrespect. I appreciate you being here. And I know you all love our country as we all do. But I believe in straight answers. I like straight answers in breakfast food. And there are only two possibilities here. Either President Biden and his team believe in open borders, or the people that the president has put in charge of the immigration policy of this country are not qualified to manage a food truck. And nobody's that incompetent. You folks believe in open borders, don't you?
Sir, I think we believe in secure borders.
You believe in then you don't even know how, well, I'm going to take 30 more seconds. You don't even know how many people have come in illegally since President Biden has been president? You're a former senior advisor to the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Salazar. And you can't even give me a number?
No, sir.
That's like going to an oncologist and asking him, what's cancer? And he says, I don't know. Give me a break.
Senator Welch.
Thank you. I thank the witnesses. Just speaking to my friend Senator Kennedy, this question of border security is one that I'm very concerned about, and I know you are, obviously. But it's an astonishing situation where you have these children who are fleeing these incredible circumstances that motivates them to take this journey all the way up to this country. Not an easy, there's a lot of tragedy here, a lot of human tragedy, not caused, I don't think, by anybody here. I'm just going to ask Ms. Marcos, can you just describe the situations for some of these kids, where they come from, what their situation is, what's motivated them to go through the Darien Gap and walk thousands of miles, or come from El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, where a lot of these kids are coming from? Just tell us what your experience is with describing these kids and what their circumstances are.
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I myself have not worked in the region, but I spent many years of my career working in and around refugee camps and with populations like the unaccompanied children who are fleeing a number of things: gang violence, extreme poverty, persecution. And we know that these are desperate situations. And what our team of professionals wants to make sure that we are doing is that when they are referred to our care by DHS or another federal entity, that they are safely taken care of, that they are in an environment that we can do full assessments. If they have a risk of trafficking, if they have been trafficked, then we make referrals to the appropriate law enforcement agencies.
And what's the process of for these kids if they're going to be sent back to their country of origin?
Senator, respectfully, I'm not probably the best person to speak to this, but certainly people fleeing horrific situations, sending them back is putting their life at risk.
Mr. Salazar, I mean, you've been, I appreciate that. A lot of what Senator Kennedy was asking you actually is something I think Congress has to do, as opposed to you can unilaterally do. But can you describe what the situation is for some of these kids that show up and what has to happen?
Sir, I actually don't know what the process is to return these individuals back to their home countries.
Ms. Nanda, there's an immense amount, a big increase in child labor. And kids who are coming are very vulnerable to being exploited to work. Sometimes it's even sex trafficking. Do you have any observations or any suggestions on what to do to reduce child exploitation, both child labor and sex exploitation as well?
Thanks so much for that question, Senator Welch. So first, I will mention that with regards to the Department of Labor, and we are charged with enforcing our child labor laws, we have a supplemental request for $100 million, which would be $50 million for the Wage and Hour Division, which does the investigations, $50 million for my office, the solicitor's office, that does all of the legal work related to the investigation, as well as that enforcement work. Wage Hour has seen a 12% decrease in their staffing over the last several years. Over the last 10 years, the solicitor's office has lost about 100 attorneys, or about 17% of our staff, with essentially flat funding. So the first thing I would say is certainly funding would help. These investigations are incredibly resource intensive in terms of human trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking or labor trafficking. All of our investigators are trained to identify human trafficking. We also have mandatory reporting within 24 hours. We are routinely training our folks. We are making sure that we are aligned as a task force and working to get as much information out to our interagency partners on that work as well.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Welch. Senator Black.